Alright, I got a good critical thought for you today. We're going to be talking about endgame design. Now, this came up as a very funny aside while I was doing a stream the other night. And basically, I multitasked talking about the game while playing a game while having a game design discussions. And for those of you who haven't visited the live streams, definitely come by and post game design questions because I love multitasking like this. But when it comes to endgame design, this has certainly evolved over the last decade, especially with the rise of games as a service, and of course, the intent to keep people playing. Now, I know we shouldn't have to say this, but to quickly define, an endgame is essentially the last part of the game. This is when, of course, the gloves are supposed to come off, and most importantly, the endgame of a title has to be fundamentally different from the mid game and the early game. Now, designers have any number of ways of doing this. You can make the level designs harder, you can add new enemies, super difficult bosses, you can even change the gameplay, as we've seen in many titles that will throw in some unique section for the final part, such as Halo's Warthog race after the final boss fight. We talk about Dead Rising and the grudge match fights, and there are probably many more examples. But endgame design is one of those areas where developers can sometimes, I guess, in a manner of speaking, not stick the landing when it comes to their games. They either make it so fundamentally different that it feels like a completely different game, or it's so similar to the early parts of the title that it just feels like I'm just repeating the same things over and over again. If you caught my stream of Phantom Trigger, or hopefully the videos as they go up here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel, the endgame of that title doesn't really feel all that different. It's just the same basic gameplay from beginning to end. And even though it adds in new enemies, the enemies themselves are all based on the same AI behavior, so it's not like it's really changing anything all that much. And when you're doing the same exact thing from beginning to middle to end, it just makes a game become that kind of a slog. And I am sure for those of you watching this, you can probably think of many games that have just kind of slipped up at the end. And when we talk about endgame design, it's actually very important to get it right, because you want the last memory of your game to be favorable. You don't want the player to be enjoying the game and then leave it on a sour note, because that hurts even more than having a rough beginning but then ultimately enjoying it in the end. And I know there is psychology around that, and if I can get my friend Jamie Magan back on, maybe we can have a talk. But with that said, let's get to the three kinds of endgame design for today's topic. The first one is very simple. It is the scripted or linear end, as in the final boss, the final level, final puzzle, the grand finale of your game. And again, pick a game that's not MMO or multiplayer related, and it's probably an example of this. And again, for every game and every design imaginable, there are different rules and considerations, and we are not going to be doing all that in the next 10 minutes. But, as I said in the last section, when you're thinking about your endgame, you have to factor into the equation that the people who are playing at this point should be masters of your game. If you've done a good enough job in terms of explaining mechanics and creating an effective progression and difficulty curve, this is the time when you basically have been saving the good stuff for this point. A really good example of this is from the Mario Galaxy series. And despite the levels being designed around accommodating multiple skill levels, the end game, especially the post game of the Mario Galaxy titles, are very challenging. And I've said this before, but I would love to see Nintendo just go all out in terms of just sticking straight to the hardcore expert level difficulty. But that is a conversation for another time. But getting back to this idea of a linear endgame, this is when things get very interesting. And I've spoken to a few developers about designing levels essentially in a beginner, a moderate, and expert level variant. And it's very interesting to think about and piece your game out like that. So, for instance, you could say, let's pretend again that my screen is a game screen. And in the beginning of a platformer, let's say it's just a flat linear level. Maybe there's an enemy or two, no bottomless pits, and we go from there. Now, if we repeat this, let's say in the middle of the road, we could throw in bottomless pits, or moving platforms, or spikes to leap over. And then when we get to the end game, we can just go crazy. Let's say we now have pixel precise jumping. Those crazy tricks. I've been watching a lot of speedrunners and expert levels of Mario Maker over the last week. So some of the crazy stuff they get to do. But when it comes to an end game, you have to properly pace it between between the other elements of your game. Meaning, if the middle of my game, let's say, is at this difficulty spike or this difficulty part, the end game shouldn't be up to here. And you shouldn't fundamentally have to change your game from mid to end game. Again, if you've done your job right, it should be a natural progression curve. And like I said, we've seen games that just go balls to the wall insane in terms of difficulty for the end game. If battles were, let's say, constrained to 3 or 5 enemies per fight, they may throw in 10 to 15. There's the infamous boss rush, which that in of itself could even be another topic. But like I said, we could easily spend the next 10 to 15 minutes on this one category alone. So let's get to the trickier, the more advanced forms of the endgame. And the second one is a scaling, or we could even call it an endless endgame. And this is typically seen in RPG-based systems, ARPGs, MMOs, any game that is built heavily on abstraction. And as we've talked about with Diablo 3 and ARPGs like it, because it's all about those numbers, a designer can just indefinitely keep things going. If you were playing with the max damage at 30,000, well, let's add in a new difficulty that takes it to 50,000, and then 60,000, and we can just keep raising these numbers up because, well, there's an infinite amount of numbers out there. Now, when it comes to a scaling endgame, this is one where I haven't found a model that I've truly fell in love with. Diablo 3 may be, at least from my mind, the poster child right now, but it's not an effective endgame because, again, when you're just changing numbers, you're just impacting the scale, not the design. When we talked about the idle genre in an earlier critical thought, I talked about the main allure. You're making numbers go up to make other numbers go down faster, or sometimes could even be going up faster. But nevertheless, I'm still clicking the same way, I'm still waiting time, it's just things are scaling up and up and up. And that is the very much allure of a progression curve. You're seeing that impact going from, oh, I'm level 70, now I'm level 80. My gear was a gear rating of 150, now I'm gear rated 300, 400. And again, we just repeat this until everyone just gets sick and tired of your game. Now, designers like this because it is a lot easier to scale content versus creating new content. You can run through the same endgame mission or the same boss battle and just tweak those numbers ever higher. And like with the Division, a gear rated pistol at 150 doesn't really do anything different than a gear rated pistol at 500 or 1000 and so on and so forth. And for those of you watching this, can you think of a game that uses a scaling or endless endgame and that managed to hook you for the long run? Diablo 3 came close, but if I wasn't doing it on the stream or I wasn't playing it while recorded, I probably would have stopped playing Diablo 3 hardcore around maybe Torment 3, Torment 4 once I got my set gear. Because again, that is the last bit of new content I ran into, and then the rest is just incremental or number-based improvement. Now, the third kind, what we've been really getting more and more of in the last few years, is and I'm not even sure what the exact definition of this one is. We can call it a prestige system, ascension, veterancy. For those of you watching this, you can think of a catchy title for it. Let me know in the comments below because I can't think of one. But for the sake of today's video, we'll just call or refer to it as Ascension. Now, Ascension simply means that instead of you staying at whatever the end cap is of your game, you will give all that back up to start at level 1 again, but with unique improvements and upgrades that wouldn't be possible otherwise. In some games, we can also add in prestige, such as in Call of Duty or Payday 2. And the purpose of this is to essentially throw the player back into the progression curve of the game, but give them something that's different enough to say that, oh, you're not just doing the same things before, you're now this much better, or something like that. And a few minutes ago I mentioned the idle and clicker genre, and Ascension is a massive, and I mean massive, part of the clicker and idle genre's progression curve. Because again, it all goes back to the concept of scaling. If the first time you play the game it took you, let's say, 50 hours to get to level 100, well, when you ascend, now you're doing it in 35 hours. And then maybe the next time, 20 hours. And along the way, you're getting new abilities, or things are different enough to make each play feel unique, even though you're technically doing the same thing over and over again. The clicker games that I've played, Clicker Heroes and Cookie Clicker, definitely have made use of Ascension mechanics. Now, one game that I play, and I'm honestly tempted to do a Dissecting Design on a clicker game, is Realm Grinder. It's a free-to-play game that was on mobile and it's now on Steam, and this may very well be the most in-depth clicker game I've played. Now, of course, with that said, that may be faint praise for some of you. But the point is, as you ascend in Realm Grinder, it actually unlocks new modes and situations for you to play. So while I may still be grinding up to, I forget whatever the resource was, what I'm doing on Ascension 5 is going to be different than what I was doing on Ascension 3. And again, we can just keep going more and more. Now, when it comes to Ascension mechanics like this, the major point, again, is that it has to give the player something different. Now, in some games, players can be happy with getting like a golden gun skin or a unique cosmetic. But for a lot of games, it's important to have something tangible. Something that, again, says, if I was playing the game at here, now I'm playing the game here. In Payday 2, for instance, they kind of started this idea, but they didn't completely follow through with the Infamous system. Infamy was designed to be the Ascension mechanic for Payday 2. And they originally designed to have, and for the Payday 2 fans watching this, I know I'm going to get yelled at, but I want to say there's 25 levels of Ascension, but it has been months since I played that game, so I don't remember for sure. But when you start playing, the first 6 levels of Infamy and Payday 2 will not only grant you a massive experience boost, but it will also give you a discount on how many points it takes to rise up the different skill trees. So inherently, this allows you to build a much powerful character, one that has more passive and unique factors compared to someone just starting out in the game. And one of the reasons why the system was kind of squared down and reduced was that Overkill saw this as being just too game-breakingly powerful. Because again, if you can just access all the high-level perks in Payday 2 on one character, well, there's not much else you really need. If you can auto-regenerate your character, get up without being yelled at, do increased damage, have increased armor, and so on and so forth. But the basic Ascension mechanics did work. It made it worth it to keep going. Now, one thing that they did keep was, as you go up in Infamy, every level grants you a greater and greater experience boost. By the end of the Infamy curve, what I would do is, the second I ascend, I would do either a very hard or overkill mission, and I would go up about 40 to 50 levels of their 100 level cap. And it got to the point where I couldn't host a game, because we would just sit there for about 5 to 10 minutes waiting for the level curve to keep going up and up and up. I remember telling people, I am so sorry. I'm almost done. We're almost out of experience. But I think I probably pissed off a few people doing that. But again, when it comes to ascension mechanics, it is a very tricky thing to do because in an essence, you're kind of cheating the player because there is no real endgame. There is no final challenge. Instead, you're saying, well, just do it all again, but here's something shiny and new to mix things up a bit. Now, for those of you watching this, what are some examples of games that you really enjoyed that had an ascension system that kept you going all the way through? And conversely, can you think of games that have had ascension systems that didn't manage to hook you, even to the point where you didn't even make it through to the first ascension? For instance, with a clicker game, I find myself that when I play those, I will play them religiously for like 3 to 5 days, just a massive grind. For those of you who are on my friends list on Steam, you probably saw me play these games, just keep them on for like 12 hours a day. And then as soon as I hit like the first or second ascension and I see what's left, I burn out completely. I mean, it is just like a switch going off, and I never touch the game again. Now, with that said, though, we're going to wrap up today's critical thought here. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back for daily discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. And let me know if you'd like to pitch me a vlog topic. And like I said, if you have one, don't hesitate to come into a chat and tell it while I'm playing a game, because I can certainly multitask like that. But until next time, have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you all on our next vlog. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and when we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.